All right. Well, Larry, as you alluded to before in one of your slides, now how have ERFA, NAGPRA, and other sacred site laws impacted the study of rock art?
I got into that pretty good when I had enough time there to be able to get into it, but hopefully you can understand that the importance is mostly related to the fact that professional archaeologists did not have that much interest in rock art, and they essentially have been forced into it because American Indians consider rock art sites to be sacred sites, I'd say 90% of the time. And so the land managing archaeologists are having to learn how to work with it. And in fact, there also is more happening with rock art. There are young people coming into it, so some of the older archaeologists are not as, they're losing track of and losing their power, and so you're getting younger archaeologists. Like at Fort Bliss, Belinda Millard, young student, is now kind of moving into a position of power, and so she's interested in trying to see the rock art sites recorded and protected. And so whereas the archaeologists that had been there before had not showed much attention to them, now she's putting energy into getting the sites recorded, in addition to the fact that Mescalero, Apache, and other tribes consider those sites to be sacred sites. So there's a good reason for her to be doing it and working with it. So, yeah.
Thank you. One more question before we go to the audience. What role have avocational archaeologists played in rock art? Perhaps you might want to mention the work that we did together at Legend Rock.
Right. Well, avocational archaeologists, and I said a little bit about this too, in the absence of an interest in archaeology by the professional community, it was largely avocational people that were doing most of the rock art recording. You'd have attorneys and doctors, and I showed you a picture of Stuart Connor up there, who actually organized the interview in 1972 with the Crow tribe. He's an attorney, a retired attorney. He's 93 years old now, but living in Billings, Montana, had a real interest in it. And the individual, man named Klaus Wellman from New York, who wrote North American Rock Art, a book on rock art, was an MD. And these are the individuals that started the American Rock Art Research Association, which is the avocational organization, also with professionals in it, but largely coordinated by avocational people who actually, it's the most important rock art organization there is in North America, and it's run largely by avocational people. So I think they're, that avocational people are extremely important, and plus, some of them are very good recorders. I mean, they do excellent work. New Mexico has an excellent program of largely avocational people that go out and record sites, and they've worked all of the techniques out by which they record, and they've got forums and et cetera, and they've worked with professional people to do it. They're a real and essential part of it all. And largely, lots and lots of projects that we do, we have those people as workers on our project. She mentioned Legend Rock, which is the site in Wyoming, which is the state-owned site in Wyoming. Well, state and Bureau of Land Management coordinate a site that's open to the public. And that site has had, it's been in existence for 30 years or something like that. Would you say, how long has Legend Rock been in existence? 30 years?
I think so.
Yeah, give or take that length of time. And the site had not had that much attention. It wasn't at the top of the state park sites, and as a result, it was getting graffiti and et cetera. And a group of largely local people, avocational people and professional people, came together and decided that something needed to be done. And the Wyoming SHPO office with Mary Hopkins, who's here, put some energy into it, and people started to, we had some early successes like Tom Noble and Nephra Matthews from the Bureau of Land Management. They used some three-dimensional recording techniques, and they showed some slides to some legislators, and they showed all this cool stuff that they could do with recording it, and all at once, everybody was involved in it. It was like the people in Thermopolis, Wyoming were involved, and you had the county highway department saying, well, if you need some gravel to put in there, we got some extra gravel, a gravel pile, we'll give you some. And we got somebody saying, and it just became this sort of collective thing to kind of come together to protect the site. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm not. Oh, thank you. And it became this sort of collective thing to protect the site. And now, if you go there, there's a pad where we have a caretaker in the summertime. The state of Wyoming does. It's a volunteer. The person who's been there for the past, I think she was there for 3 years, stays and watches the people that come. They built a little museum, so there's a little interpretive center. I mean, so largely an avocational or local effort that kind of came together with some money from various places to change that into a completely different dynamic in the way that site's protected.
Thank you, Larry. I'd like to go to our audience now. I'm not sure who was first.
This is, can you hear me? I think on that question for Larry, here in the Mid-Atlantic, do you have any comments on the state of research, particularly use of the recent technologies on rock art petroglyphs in the Mid-Atlantic? Could you hear me?
I think you were asking what is the state of technology for recording?
State of research, including the use of
okay,
modern
state of research
technology.
for here in the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. In the Mid-Atlantic area, the recording of rock art. Yeah, and we've got Jack sitting in the front row here, who is Virginia's kind of protector of rock art. Is that right, Jack? Yeah. And the part of there is obviously one of the considerable differences is you don't have as much rock in this part of the world, and so you don't have as much rock art because there isn't as much rock. You know, I taught at the University of North Dakota, and here I was a rock art specialist, and there were probably about 40 rocks in the whole state. You know what I mean? So you end up with having to drive west to be able to find places to do it. But I will tell you that places like Alabama and across other states more to the south and North Carolina, they do have rock art, and it often is painted stuff and painted material. And another difficulty is you got so many trees that lots of times you'll get vegetation from the trees will come down on the top of it, and you'll get acid from the leaves and et cetera, which will harm it. So it's not usually as vivid or as open. It's more covered and not down. So it's not as spectacular, if that answers your question. But it's here, and it doesn't make it any less important. You know, I mean, it's just that there isn't as much of it and not quite as spectacular. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
All right, next question.
I wanted to ask if there were any technological approaches to locating a rock art site, or do you rely on word of mouth from local people who may have been monitoring the situation all along?
Yeah, so if you got that question, it's are there technological advantages to looking for sites? Lots of it comes with word of mouth. I mean, we get told about sites by people. That's why that's another good reason to have a good working relationship with the avocational community. But I will tell you that I have been in situations. There's on the Pinyon Canyon Maneuver site in Colorado. There's a long basalt dike which runs for like 6 miles, and we walked along that dike and we found 40 rock art sites in the length of that dike that were heretofore totally unknown. And so that while usually we get some kind of a lead, it's more frequent that what happens is that we go to that site and we find, they say that there were 2 panels of rock art at that site, and we find 10, you know, because we find 8 more at that site, partially through using our D-stretch cameras and et cetera, but partially just by the fact that we kind of know where to look at these sites. So searching for them, though, I will tell you that there isn't any reason you shouldn't continue to look. Get that D-stretch on your camera phone and just walk along the rock and take pictures. You might find a rock art site. So.
Thank you. Next question.
I was in Sulawesi, Indonesia this last year, and they had recalibrated the age of the rock art there using a uranium thorium method. And I was just wondering, is that common here in the United States too with the rock art that you're looking at?
No, it's not. Tell me the method again, though, so I can hear.
Uranium, thorium.
Oh, yeah.
Decay.
Yeah. So this was in Spain?
This was in Sulawesi, Indonesia, and it was done by an anthropologist
Oh,
or
yeah.
archaeologist
Yeah.
from Australia.
Right, right. I know what you're talking about
Do you?
now. Yes, right. Yeah, that technique is pretty new.
Yeah, it is
and
new.
whether or not it's going to stand the test of time, it's just going to need some more. It's like Marvin Rowe's technique that he uses. He's been doing it for 25 years, and it's kind of it now stands the test of time. He's improved upon it and so on. So I think it'll be really interesting to learn if that technique works. And the reason why is because it dates much older art than you can do with radiocarbon. And radiocarbon will only go back to 40,000 max, really, or 50. And you got dead carbon. So that technique takes you into much older art. So if it works, it's going to be a wonderful addition. So yeah, thanks.
It created a lot of new interest in Sulawesi because it was considered went from like 10,000 years old to almost 40,000 years old.
Right.
So,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, there's
Thank you.
some extremely old art in that part of the world, that's for sure.
All right, next question.
I would like to ask about your thoughts on the best way to safeguard rock art. And what I have in mind here is what's much being talked about right now, bear's ears. On one hand, it's being put on the map so that there will be more tourists who will come by, and I'm a tourist, so that it puts that rock art more at risk. But yet, with the way that things had been, it was at great risk because there was no one there to keep an eye on that. So as you weigh the pros and cons as to what should be done with that tract of land, that is now controlled by BLM. That is a federal land to begin with. What are your thoughts about what should be done with that land?
Well, you're into an area that's really pretty hard to deal with. I mean, you've really got your finger on a very difficult area, and essentially what it is that if you identify the rock art site and the public comes, it's often destroyed. And so you're better off to keep the location secret, and it's usually better protected if it's kept secret. But you end up sort of losing the power of having the public on your side if you don't tell them where it is. And so I think the usual approach, and no one wants to use these words, but it's the sacrifice site idea. And you're not giving a site up, but what you do is you usually try to get a site that at least public land managing people will try to get a site or a series of sites, and they will kind of open those to the public and then sort of encourage the visitation to go to those sites, like Legend Rock in Wyoming, or like the Dinitah out of Farmington, New Mexico, where the Bureau of Land Management has opened some pathways that you can go to, and you can drive your car, self-driven, get out. You can get out and walk around and self-find some of the rock arts that there. And Arizona's done some of the same sort of thing. But you would discover that 2 canyons over, there's a bunch more rock art that they're not telling you about. They're not encouraging you to go to that. They're sort of encouraging you, and then they're sort of monitoring those areas because they can see the people in that one place and kind of see what's going on with the site. So I think that's the usual approach to doing it. There's no perfect way to do it, that's for sure.
Thank you for the question. Next.
What are the oldest sites of rock art in North America, and where are they located? And also, what's the age of the Great Gallery near Canyonlands?
Oh yeah, the Great Gallery, which is a wonderful, wonderful site. That's another of those sites that is in Horseshoe Canyon or Barrier Canyon in Utah. And you can go to that. You can park in a parking lot and walk 2 miles in and 2 miles out. And you have to go down a canyon and do your hike into it. And if you're capable of doing that, you can get to that site. It's a wonderful site of these figures that stand 7 and 8 feet tall, painted on the rocks. And the general consensus is that they're somewhere around 2,000 years old. There are some more recent figures that are added into parts of that panel, but the general consensus is that somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 years is the age of the Great Gallery. The oldest site in North America. Now you got me on a really good topic that I like to talk about. It actually, right now, is with the best dating evidence. That's always the question, is are the dates good? You know, did the dating method work? And the best site dated right now is in a place called Winnemucca Lake in Nevada. And Larry Benson and his colleagues about 3-4 years ago from University of Colorado dated some abstract, they call it Great Basin carved art. And it's some carved figures into the tuff out there. And they actually have a number of ways that they're dating it at that location. And in part because that lake was a glacial lake, and at one point the rocks were underwater, and now the rocks are not, and et cetera. And so you can go back and forth, and the dates are around 14,500 years before Clovis. And in fact, there are a lot of other dates in that part of the world also, for not a lot, but dates on caves and other sites that are in that same range. So this is kind of this pre-Clovis or older than the oldest Paleo-Indian stuff that this art is. That's the best dated art for age in North America.
All right, next question.
In Utah, we saw what I think is a fairly well-known place called Newspaper Rock.
Yes.
Just wondering, do archaeologists feel that there are places that are more like graffiti walls, or just a whole lot of people put whatever they wanted to? That's all.
I think that's actually a really good question too. Newspaper Rock is largely Ute Indian art, and I think it's going to be, rather than use the word graffiti, I don't think I'd use that word as much as I might use that narrative or biographic kind of stuff, so that there was a reason that those images were done, so that they were decorating those walls with that reason to show for some event or something that had taken place at that location.
Thank you. Next.
Yeah, when this guy mentioned bear ears, that reminded me of what is like the view of the anthropologist with the possible opening up of different areas for development. Trump is talking about opening up different areas of national parks for development, oil development.
What is your opinion on some of the federal land managing agencies opening up the parks and monuments for development?
Well, that's similar to the other question, and you end up with should parks be preserving? And at the same time, if Bears Ears came up, as I heard it in that question back there a few minutes ago, Bears Ears, you know, is now on the chopping block. Conceivably, we're going to lose Bears Ears. And so when you had various tribes out there who were trying to get Bears Ears, they were using rock art as one of the things that they said that they wanted preserved in that park. And so now if you don't get the monument, Bears Ears, then you end up with the problem of it's going to have development, and I'd rather take the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management than I would oil and gas lots of times when it comes to trying to protect rock art. Now, that's not always the case. I don't want to be critical totally of oil and gas, because there are certainly companies that work hard to work with archaeologists to preserve and protect. And there's an excellent program in the Permian Basin in Carlsbad, Colorado, or Carlsbad, New Mexico, right now, where the Permian Basin, the oil companies have come together and others have put money into a fund that's used, and there's going to be a project there to record some 22 rock art sites sometime in the next year. And that's coming from oil and gas money that's doing that. So, you know, it's not always negative to say something about. But in terms of, I mean, I'd rather take it being some federal management and trying to keep it protected than I would development.
Thank you. Next question.
Yeah, hi. This is a related question. In your last slide, you enumerated some of the acts of Congress that protected Native American sacred sites and rock art. And there was also a mention there of an executive order. What was the executive order, and is that executive order in danger of being overturned by the occupant a few miles away?
I don't think we're too worried about ERFA and NAGPRA and that executive order being overturned right now. That's the Sacred Sites, Clinton's Sacred Sites Act. that I had up there with that executive order, and that's long enough ago that I don't think I'd worry too much about it being overturned. But I mean, those are important laws for access of American Indians to their sacred sites, and they're not just rock art sites, of course, but just that rock art sites are often their sacred sites. So, but you know, it's always a constant, ongoing, like the Bears Ears thing, where you had something created, and you know, and we have another New Mexico, Oregon mountain site that you know also is one of the ones that's being considered. And I know when Sally Jewell was there to talk about the creation of the Oregon mountain site in New Mexico, rock art was one of the things she talked about as being one of the important things that it's going to protect.
So just a quick follow-up question. If that executive order, which is broader than a particular site, is in danger,
Yeah.
would the museum take the effort and notify the members or make public what's going on?
I'm sure there will be. Although I'm not associated with this museum, certainly my organization, Sacred Sites Research, would start trying to get lobbying efforts and whatever happening, you know, to try to protect or to make sure that those laws stay in place.
Okay. Hopefully the museum would take some action too.
That's a good question. We're limited as to what we can do because we are a federal agency.
Federal agency.
So, well, thank you very much, Larry, for your presentation today. I'm so appreciative of you being here. I want to thank our audience for coming also, and for our audience online today. Immediately following this presentation, we're going to have a book signing by Larry out in the Rasmuson Theater lobby. Books will be for sale at the shop just across the hall from where we'll be sitting. So thank you again for coming. We appreciate it very much.